Well, ladies and gentlemen, here we are, April 2019, and I'm so happy to say that I've just hit 150,000 subscribers here on the channel. Never in my wildest imagination did I think that so many of you would enjoy what I do, but you do, and it makes me happy beyond belief, really it does. This has just always been a hobby for me, and just something to do in my spare time. And I can't believe so many of you enjoy it. Well, I do. But you're here, and I'm so happy you've been along for the ride, I really am. Some of you have been hankering for a werewolf story, and what better time to do one? So, it's Friday, and once again, it's time to sit back and relax with your favourite drink, and listen. Well, guys, I've had a lot on my mind lately. Maybe typing all of it out will help me process everything that's happened. I recently came face to face with something that, only until very recently, I thought to be entirely superstitious fiction. And when your perception of what is and isn't reality gets suddenly flipped so violently, it can really mess your proverbial shit up pretty bad. Now, I'm no author, but hopefully I can put all this together in a coherent enough fashion to be legible. So, here goes. So, everything was set into motion last Monday when my friends Dex and Trey invited, and by invited I mean strongly insisted, me to go camping way ass out in the middle of gondamn Deliverenceville nowhere. But with the stress and struggle of adult life kicking the shit out of me week after week, the simplicity of sitting on my ass next to a campfire for a few days sounded not so awful. And it might have been mentioned that Jasmine, a girl I'd been swooning over for almost a whole year now, would be coming along, as she was tight with Dex's girlfriend Leslie. Trey's girlfriend, who I hadn't met yet, and whose name still escapes me, and one of her friends would also be tagging along. The entirety of the group pulled up outside my apartment early that morning. This stuck in my memory so well because I remember being mildly embarrassed for Jasmine to see me stumble clumsily down the stairs to the ground floor, my clothes and camping equipment scattering as I landed an almost picture-perfect scorpion, ship-whipping my face into the patch of grass luckily positioned just in front of the steps. Oh, shit, I mumbled under my breath as I clambered around collecting my dispersed belongings back together as I heard my friends howl like baboons from the parked SUV. Holy hell, what a slam. Are you alright? Here, let me help. A voice called from their direction as, to my absolute horror and delight, I see no other than Jasmine coming to my aid. I stammered, trying to blow and remove the rogue strands of hair from my face. Yeah, I'm fine. Thanks. My pride broke my fall. I remember feeling pretty accomplished in how hard she laughed at my joke. Once we gathered up all of my things and we loaded them into the SUV and set sail towards the general area we'd be setting up camp, stopping only to stock up on the necessities like lethal amounts of various liquors and other alcoholic beverages, hamburger meat, hot dogs, small components, ice, and the like. The first red flag popped up as we were driving down the back road to get to the trail we would have to hike for a few miles to get to the campsite. So, who owns this property? Leslie asked. Hell if I know, said Dex. My cousin said he's been coming out here for years and never ran into another soul the entire time. So you've never been here before? Trey's girlfriend interjected. Well, no, but if Trent says it's fine, it's fine. He's never steered me wrong before, Dex replied. Isn't Trent the one that you told if you wore a cape and jumped off the roof, you'd be able to fly like Superman? Trey laughed from the seat behind me. I was young, Dex exclaimed defensively. Weren't you like 13? I asked jokingly, and smiled as I heard Jasmine giggle next to me. He was really persuasive in his argument. You know what? Fuck you guys, he said, placing the left half of his face in his hand in embarrassment as he continued to drive with the other. All right, shitheads, end of the road. We gotta hoof it from here, Dex said, as he pulled to a stop in front of the mouth of the trail. Everyone limber up, grab your junk, and let's get going. It's about 4 miles till ripped off my ass o'clock, and I don't want to be late. So we collected our various stuff and headed down the trail. The almost entirely uphill, barely even an actual trail. By the time we made it to the clearing, I just let everything drop to the ground with a defeated thud and sat down on my sleeping bag as everyone else began to follow my example and plop down around various locations in the small clearing that was to be our camp. Guys, Dex wheezed as he brought up the rear out of the trail. I think I might be just a little out of shape. A little, Trey said, almost in unison with me, causing us both to laugh harder than we probably should have. You literally never exercised a day in your entire life, Trey continued. Dex, probably unable to summon enough air to speak a proper insult in response, settled for flipping us both the bird and slunk down face first onto the ground next to the ruins of what was once a fire pit. We then spent the next hour setting up our tents and building a fire before things got too dark. The first night was pretty uneventful, though. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, but it's not uncommon to feel that way so deep out in the woods surrounded by the darkness. I spent the bulk of the night trying to work up the courage to strike up an actual conversation with Jasmine, but with little success. The sum of my efforts was, it was established that we both had a mild obsession with the TV shows Monk and The Mentalist. While we spent a good deal of time discussing them, the conversation never really went much deeper than that. But she did mention she was single, in passing, which definitely encouraged my efforts in proceeding. After a while, we all retired to our respective tents. The feeling of being watched followed me even into the thin walls of my waterproof nylon shelter. So I killed time fantasizing about Jasmine sneaking into my tent to continue the conversation, though with little hope of it coming true. The alcohol consumed the night before and the late turn-in, combined with the exhaustion from the hike, ensured that we all managed to wake with just enough time to collect ample firewood to get us through the night. It was while gathering the wood that I noticed a large animal footprint in the bare dirt, just outside of the clearing of our camp. It was absolutely massive. I immediately called Dex and Trey over to investigate. "Is it a bear?" I asked, with a noticeable tremble in my voice. "Nah," Dex answered. "There aren't any wild bears down here. Looks like a dog." Trey bent down, placing his hand over the track, the tips of his extended fingers falling just short of the edges of the would-be paw, and then looked up at Dex. "Big-ass dog," Dex added unsurely. Suddenly, a limb landed sharply on the ground behind us, causing us all to flinch at once. "Oh, Joanna! Shit!" I just remembered Trey's girlfriend's name was Joanna. "Oh, make some goddamn noise, Christ!" Trey said angrily. Sorry, I guess. What's got you so jumpy? What were you all looking at?" she asked. So we explained the print we found, and then finished gathering firewood, but while staying within each other's sight, for safety's sake. Once the sun started to duck behind the trees, we made our way back to the camp, where Jasmine and Leslie had begun to cook dinner on the fire. The smell of cooking food was a welcome scent to my nose at first, until thoughts of it attracting whatever made the print back towards our camp. Needless to say, this thought sent my mind straight into high alert, and had me constantly checking over my shoulder as we stacked the gathered limbs into the pile next to the fire. As we ate, I told Jasmine and Leslie what we'd found, after Jasmine asked what had me acting so nervous all of a sudden. "Do you think he'll come into the camp?" she asked in alarm. "Oh, I'm sure the fire would scare it off if it gets too close," I answered, only half convinced of what I was saying was the truth. "And even if it does, we can just feed it Dex as a distraction," Trey added to the conversation. "He's so high in cholesterol, it'll probably feel too sick to come after the rest of us after it's done with him." He chuckled along with the rest of us as Dex shot us his signature spiteful look and middle finger, and then joined in the laughter. But the fun was cut short as the deep, unmistakable snap of a large limb broke through our combined laughter, the culprit remaining just out of sight. Our eyes widened as we all looked from person to person to see if one of us was absent to account for the commotion. But as my eyes passed from Dex to Trey to Leslie to Jasmine to Joanna, I could see the same look of realization that none of us were responsible for the sound wash across their faces. "Hello?" Trey called out into the darkness. We all sat there in silence, hoping for a voice to reply from the edge of the fire's dim light. Trey began to get to his feet and repeated himself by calling out again, a little louder. "Help!" But before he could get the word out, an ear-splitting howl drowned out his voice and assaulted our ears with such force that we all had to cover them with our hands just to ease the pain. As the noise from the howl died down, the group began to back away from the source of the sound, only to be met with a guttural growl from behind us on the opposite side of the camp. In a panic, we all huddled near the center of the camp, near the fire, unsure of how to react as we followed the sound of two separate creatures stalking around the perimeter of the clearing, snapping limbs and rustling dead leaves as they moved through the brush. "What the actual fuck?" Dex exclaimed from my right. "What are we supposed to do?" Leslie cried, almost to herself, from my left. "I don't know, guys," I responded, mostly to myself as well, as I fumbled blindly at my feet, trying to grab the hatchet we'd been using to process the firewood. I knew it was quite sharp, but didn't know if it'd be much help against whatever was lurking at the edge of the dark woods. The growls continued, and were getting noticeably closer minute after agonizing minute. A horrific scream crackled from Trey's direction. I wheeled around and mirrored his scream with my own, as the rest of the group followed suit, as we all watched two massive beasts step from the shadows into the soft orange glow. The overwhelming terror made it difficult to fully process what I was looking at. I knew, in the back of my mind, exactly what it was in front of me, but the word evaded my consciousness, as if my brain was unwilling to admit what it was witnessing was actually real. They stood on two legs, well over 7 feet tall, though one was slightly larger, covered in thick and coarse black fur. Their legs were long and crooked, bent like the hind legs of a canine. Their bodies were wide and muscular, but still retained an almost slender form, and their long arms were tipped in curved claws that looked more at home on a large bird of prey than on any kind of land mammal. But their faces were truly nightmarish. They were elongated, and their lips drew back to display rows of pearly white, jagged teeth and fangs. As they stepped closer, the reflective glow left their eyes to reveal the bright yellow of their irises, which seemed to emanate their own light, as they turned into the back of my mind forever. Frickin' werewolves. The words fell from my lips before I'd even had the presence of mind to realize it was me who was speaking. I found myself literally paralyzed with fear, unable to join the group who had begun to huddle together behind me for what was sure to be our last moments that we would share together. My knees began to tremble and quake as I felt a warm sensation on my leg, barely registering that I'd just pissed myself in terror. One of them, the larger of the two, leaned forward towards me, and I dropped to the ground as its face lowered to meet mine. I closed my eyes tight in anticipation of whatever torturous end was undoubtedly about to befall me. But as I waited, nothing. I began to hear a strange rasping sound in front of me, and as I peeked from one squinted eyelid, I saw that they were both now on the ground making strange coughing noises and convulsing. The full realization of what I was watching didn't hit me until the smaller of the two pointed at my now urine-soaked jeans and beat its fist against the ground as it continued to make the weird coughing sounds along with the larger one. As they did this, the larger one extended a hooked talon and began to scratch into the dried soil. P-U-N-K-E-D. Punked, I whispered to myself as I read the word out. They're just fucking with us. I made an attempt to announce to the quivering group behind me as I watched the two monsters roll with what was apparently side-splitting laughter in absolute disbelief. What? Trey squeaked from behind me. They're pranking us, I think, I answered. I think this was all just them playing a prank, I continued, turning my head to address everyone directly. As I said this, they all drew back at once, and I whipped my head back towards the beasts to see that the larger one had risen back to its, or his, I could now make out that rather clearly, feet, and doubled over with one hand on his knee for support as he waved a clawed hand in a gesture as if to say, calm down, and then pointed to me and nodded his head, which I assumed was in confirmation of what I had just said. Then, as if in exhaustion from laughing, plopped almost comically onto his rear. Are you freaking serious? I roared, storming towards the hulking creature and flailing wildly as I struck him feverishly on his shoulder and chest. Despite all my fury and rage, it seemed to be to no avail, as he raised one of his satellite dish-sized hands to me and brushed me away like an angry kitten. He stood and wiped a tear of laughter away from his eye with the knuckle of his other hand. By the time what I determined to be the female one had joined him, standing by his side in the same looming but unthreatening way. What? It was just a prank? Dex spoke up from the back of the group. The smaller one nodded, a barely identifiable grin sneaking across her fur-covered face as she did. Holy shit, that's awesome, Dex squealed, running past the rest of us with a newfound mix of bravery and enthusiasm. That was the best prank scare literally in the history of scare pranks. You guys are great. How the hell do you get these to look so good? This is like big-budget Hollywood. Oh, shit. Oh my god. It's real. He trailed off as he pulled back the female's jowl, which she had been patiently allowing him to tug, and pull at her hands and face in childish curiosity, coming to the realization I had already reached, that they were the genuine article. Oh shit, sorry, Dex apologized as he hastily retreated back to the comfort of the group. My bad, he added, peeking out from behind the cover of my shoulder. They're real frickin' werewolves, he whispered loudly into my ear, though I can't imagine the words failed to reach either of the creature's ears. Slowly, the group got comfortable enough to begin inching slowly towards the beasts, but not without an ample amount of caution and care. By the time I'd grabbed a spare set of pants and underwear out of my tent, rinsed and toweled off, and changed clothes, everyone was gathered around the monsters like small children investigating a new dog, all caution and fear long gone and replaced with almost giddy excitement. I, however, kept my distance, not so much out of fear or caution, though it played its part, but because I'd always been the one who got cranky whenever I was pranked or scared. But, as time passed, intrigue won out, in no small part to my noticing that Jasmine was absolutely enamored by them, and so I decided I had to take this opportunity to see a real mythical creature up close and in the flesh, and share a once-in-a-lifetime moment with my crush. They both obviously demonstrated human intelligence, but it seemed they were incapable of speaking in their present form. They would simply nod and gesture in response to our questions. After some time, they both made their way to the edge of the woods and waved goodbye as they disappeared into the dark once more. We all sat back down around the fire in silence once more, before any of us could think of something to say. "Holy hell," Trey said with a laugh. "I know, right?" Joanna replied. And so we sat by the fire, fervently discussing the incredible experience we'd all just had, in some ways to almost make sure we had all seen the same thing, and that it wasn't something that one of us had just hallucinated. As we sat there laughing and regaling, we heard footsteps coming towards the camp from the woods, but these steps were much lighter and undoubtedly human. We all turned towards the direction of the sound, as two men emerged wearing filthy clothes. Apparently equally as filthy were they, as the stench of the body odor reached from them across the entire clearing. I noticed Jasmine cover her nose in disgust. One wore a ragged old red trucker's cap, with a faint outline of white letters that had long since been worn away. "What y'all doing all the way out here, hooting and hollering and carrying on like that?" the one without the hat asked. "Yeah, someone might hear all that and think y'all up to something," the hatted one added. "Oh, you the owners? If you are, we're really sorry. We just wanted to go on a little trip to relax in the woods for a few days," Trey answered. "Something like that," the hatless man said as he continued to march his way into the center of our camp. "You see, this here's our place of business," he continued, gesturing towards the woods around us with both hands. "What kind of business would that be?" Dex asked stupidly, as it was apparent that whatever it wasn't legal. "The kind of business you don't want people running off and telling other people where you're doing it," the hatted man said, now standing uncomfortably close to Jasmine. But before she could move away, the man snatched up a handful of her hair, drawing a pistol from behind his back and placing it against her temple. Without thinking, I started to lunge towards the man, but before I could gain any momentum, I felt a sharp pain in my side and dropped to the ground, moaning in agony as I did. Apparently, the other man had made his way up to my side and punched me in the liver, forestalling any heroics. Jasmine and Leslie both screamed in fright as I rolled back and forth on the ground, clutching my side. The hatless man, pulling out a pistol of his own, dragged me to my feet as they both rounded us up into a tight group and told us to stay put and be quiet, and that if one of us tried anything, they would kill the person next to us. We sat for some time as they talked back and forth between themselves. I was only able to make out some of what they said. "Well, I know we have to kill him, but that don't mean that's the first thing we gotta do to him," the hatted one said, leaning towards the other but keeping his eyes trained on us as he did. He continued, "What I'm saying is, we shoot all the ones with the peckers first, 'cause I ain't gonna be fooling around with none of that. Then we give the ladies a little romance before we take care of them. How about it?" "All right," the hatless one said, "but as long as I get the dark-haired one," he continued, pointing towards Jasmine with his pistol. As I saw her eyes widen in terror, I felt rage swell up from deep down in my gut, and jumped to my feet, only to have the hatless man press the muzzle of his gun against my forehead. "Whoa now, someone sure is in a hurry to eat a bullet, ain't ya?" he quipped with a rotten, toothy smile snaking across his dirty face. Without thinking, I spat right dead in the center of his eye in defiance. Flinching back, he chuckled angrily to himself. "Well, if that's how you want it to be," he growled. The putrid reek of his chewing tobacco assaulted my nostrils as he made a disgusting snort, coughing up a ball of mucus and tobacco juice into his mouth. And there, in the moment, I caught myself genuinely wishing he would just blow my brains out and spare me the torture of having him spit that revolting bile in my face. I turned my head and closed my eyes tight in anticipation. ready to accept my fate for the second time that night. But just then, a familiar loud snapping of large limbs in the underbrush entered my ears. I opened my eyes to see the bewildered look now plastered on the face of the vile man in front of me as he began to peek behind him to determine the source of the commotion. As his head turned over his shoulder, his view fell on the massive silhouette of the male werewolf that had seemed like little more than a past lucid dream at this point. But he was really there, and the man really saw him. As the hulking beast entered completely into the light, the man wheeled around to train his pistol sights on it. But before he could, the thing wrapped a massive, clawed hand around the arm that held his gun, and in one fluid motion, ripped it clean from its shoulder. I can still hear the sound. I can only describe it as the crunching squelch of someone tearing a head of lettuce violently in half. The man's arm was removed so quickly and cleanly, it never disturbed the rest of his body. He only managed to respond with a whimpering, "Oh!" before the creature reached forward with its other hand, closing its fingers over the man's entire head before a sharp bend of his wrist snapped the man's head backwards and upside down, causing him to be face to face with me once again for a brief second, in which I unintentionally repeated his last word with a soft "oh" through my covered mouth, before watching him collapse into a pile on the ground. Screams began to erupt from the man wearing the hat, his entire left side now covered in spattered blood from the severed arm of his accomplice. But before he could collect himself and raise his own pistol, the second werewolf bolted out of the woods and in one vicious swing brought her claws down on him, leaving 4 open channels of blood and gore deep into his chest, and slamming him into the ground with a sickening thud. Jasmine and Leslie both cried out in shock and terror at what they had just witnessed. Still alive, but only just, the remaining man coughed and choked on his blood as he struggled to drag his broken body away from the monster staring down at him. After observing this for a few seconds, she reached down, grabbed him by his ankle, then snatched him off the ground, swinging him face first into a tree on which his head exploded against in a pink mist of skull fragments and brain matter, before tossing his now lifeless body atop the other. Jasmine screamed again. Leslie fainted, causing Dex to have to frantically struggle to keep her from hitting her head on one of the rocks that made up the fire pit. Leaning down, the larger one sniffed the bodies inquisitively. He then raised his head to look back in the direction the 2 men had emerged from. In only 2 steps, he made his way across the camp, reached into one of our bags to retrieve a towel, which he then instructed Dex to wrap around a branch and soak in kerosene from one of the lamps. "What the hell are you doing?" I asked, trying to make sense of his actions. Once again, he reached a long claw down towards the ground, and in the dry dirt inscribed 2 words. "Meth Lab." Once I acknowledged that I'd read and understood them, he wrote another 2. "Probably more. Probably. You have awful spelling," I said in judgmental tone to the primal beast I'd just watched rip a full-grown man's arm off like a leaf off a twig. "Oh, sorry," I added, seeing him squint his glowing yellow eyes at me in agitation. It was then that he picked up the detached arm, wrapped branch, can of kerosene, and a lighter out of the pocket of one of the dead man's jeans, passing them off to me. "What the shit do I do with these?" I asked in confusion. He bent down, grabbing the corpses by their ankles, then gestured with his head towards the direction they'd come from. "Oh, wait. No, I really don't want—" I was interrupted by a low growl, encouraging me to follow the directions the 7.5-foot wolf monster was giving me. As it departed down the narrow opening in the woods, about 5 or so feet behind the creature, it was apparent that the female would be staying with everyone else at the camp. Upon returning, I was told this time consisted mostly of the female wolf letting Jasmine scratch her ears like some kind of grim house pet, while Dex sat in an almost catatonic state, and Joanna and Trey tended to Leslie's still unconscious body. Though I was told that at one point the female got up, walked over to the tree that she'd bashed the man's head to pieces on, and ripped the entire blood-stained patch off the trunk, tossing it into the fire to burn. As the beast walked ahead of me, I struggled to keep up with its abnormally long stride, but was too nervous to bother him with asking to slow down at this point. It wasn't until I tripped while trying to make up lost distance, and almost broke my face on a fallen tree, that he stopped and looked back to check on me. As I attempted to stand, I shrieked in pain. I must have hurt my ankle when I fell, and couldn't put any weight on it. Rolling his eyes in annoyance, he dropped the bodies he'd been dragging casually beside him the whole way, and then made his way back to where I'd fallen, turning his back to me, and knelt down. I didn't understand the gesture until he pointed towards his upper back, instructing me to climb on. Once I got myself, the loose arm, the branch, and the cairn of kerosene situated, he grabbed the lifeless legs and continued down the path. It didn't take long for me to identify a mysterious, fleshy object that kept bouncing off my legs, which I'd wrapped around his waist from time to time as he walked. "Oh, dude," I said, thoroughly grossed out by the werewolf dong knocking against my exposed skin. I heard the cough-like laugh once again as he chuckled to himself. "You know you're nasty, right?" I said with a sternness and frustration in my voice, reflecting my displeasure at the situation. He let out an apologetic whine that sounded comically doggish, which I will admit helped me deal with the situation a little better for the remainder of the way. As we neared the end of the trail, lights from a dilapidated old shack began to peek through the trees. Once we reached the edge, he sat me down just out of reach of the light, placing his finger over his lip in an effort to tell me to remain quiet. Leaving the corpses beside me, he then made his way up to the front door of the cabin on all fours, so silently it caused a chill to crawl down my back, and I shivered as I realized that the noise they made at the camp really was entirely theatrical, and that if they really wanted to do us any harm, we would never have known they were there before it was already far too late. I was gazing upon an unstoppable apex predator, a creature that had been the very substance of nightmares since time immemorial, with a sense of humor of a college frat boy. My attention snapped back to current events as he reached the door. He then proceeded to just as quietly climb onto the room of the small structure. Then lowering his hand, he knocked 3 hard raps against the wooden door, then withdrew his hand back out of sight. I heard muffled speaking from inside that became clear and legible as the man inside swung the door open, exclaiming, "Well, I hope you pricks had fun. I told you just to shoot them and get rid of the bodies, but no, you always have to fuck around." As he spoke, the werewolf on the roof seemed to shake his head in disappointment at his words. The man began to speak again, after realizing his comrades were nowhere to be found. "Hey, where the hell are you sons of bitch?" His words were cut short as the werewolf brought a single clawed finger down into the top of the man's head, puncturing straight through the center and exiting through the bottom of his jaw. He lingered on his feet only for a moment, before collapsing into a heap on the porch. The beast then stuck his head inside to check for any remaining signs of life, and once sure it was clear, he crawled back down off the roof, waving me towards the house. As I approached, he picked the man's cadaver up by the head and, in a rather unceremonious fashion, tossed it through the cabin's doorway. He then took the arm and can of kerosene from me and threw them in as well before retrieving the other bodies and doing the same. He then motioned with his thumb for me to light the towel wrapped around the branch, so I did without hesitation or question this time. Taking it from me, he tossed it into the cabin, swept me up and ran back toward the trail. Moments later, my ears were met with a resounding explosion, and I looked back to see a large ball of fire rising just above the tree line. "What if that catches the forest on fire?" I asked. Sliding to a stop, he looked at me, then back towards the cabin, then back at me, before continuing back down the path again. I know an "oh fuck" look when I see one, regardless of the species, but luckily the forest seemed to remain unaffected by the fire. As we made it back to the camp, he sat me down on one of the logs we'd used as benches around the campfire, and to my extreme delight, I was greeted with Jasmine diving into my arms, practically ecstatic that I had made it back, until I yelped when she bumped into my injured ankle. "Oh my God, did you get hurt?" she exclaimed in alarm. "Oh, I just tripped and sprained my ankle, I think. It's not too bad," I reassured her, trying to act tougher than I really am. "Do you want some ice for it?" Jasmine asked, with genuine care in her voice. "I would like some ice," I responded, "but I would love some vodka." "I think we can make that happen," she obliged, walking over to the cooler. "Oh," I sighed, laying long ways across the log I'd been sitting on, as I propped my leg up and rested my head in my hands. "Well, I know you wanted vodka, but we've got water and Coke," she called from next to the ice chest. "Don't tell me. The werewolves took all the..." "Yeah, the werewolves took all the alcohol," she finished for me. "But they left a note." I sat back up on the log, only to realize I'd laid my hands down on a small chunk of hillbilly brain that had been resting on the log next to where I'd sat. I looked down to confirm that both of them were in fact nowhere to be found. Walking up next to Jasmine in the cooler, I looked down at the message scrawled in the dirt in front of me and grimaced at the words. "Thank you." What? Did the werewolf just use an Yeah, the werewolf used an emoticon. Jasmine finished for me once again. The rest of the time was spent mostly in silence, as we packed our things and tried to process the events of the previous night, along with gathering the energy to make the exit hike back to the SUV. And as we all filed out of the trail, to the welcome side of the vehicle, bringing up the rear, I glanced back down the long, winding path. Resting against the improvised crutch Dex and Trey made for me, and thinking about the events that transpired, and what they'd taught me, I thought to myself, werewolves might not be the mindless, savage baby-killing demons all the stories throughout the years have painted them to be. Hey, they even demonstrated empathy and concern for our well-being in a time of crisis. None of us would probably be alive right now, if not for them helping us the way they did. And I can even forgive them for scaring the literal piss out of me and traumatizing us, probably all for life. Hell, people do that to each other every day, and admittedly, there are much worse things they could be doing to campers as 7.5-foot tall monsters. But boy, werewolves sure are assholes. I really wanted that vodka. So that's another one I've had in the vault for quite a while, Dr. Creepen's Vault, the subreddit I set up so I could read pretty much exclusive stories here on the channel, and it seems to have worked out pretty well so far. Like I said, I've had that one in the vault for a while, and perfect time to unleash it, I say. Not exactly a conventional werewolf story, but a great one nonetheless. Your thoughts, feelings, and anything you want to say in the comment section below the video, and I'll do my best to join in the chat. But it's the weekend. What are you doing listening to me? Go on, get yourselves out there and have some fun. I'll be back again for you on Monday, and I just hope you'll all enjoy me. Onwards and upwards to 200,000 subscribers, eh? Well, I'll still be here, and I hope you'll join me too. Until then, sweet dreams and bye-bye. Thank you so much for choosing to spend your time listening to me. Now, if you enjoyed the Dr. Creepen experience, then come find me on Facebook. Come chat with me on Twitter. Listen to the background music and download it if you like on SoundCloud. Drop by the store, pick up a t-shirt. And, importantly, if you've got a story you'd like me to read, send it to Dr. Creepen's Vault, the subreddit I set up so that I could read your stories. Now, looking forward to seeing you all again real soon. So, come check me out, okay?